Today I'll be showing you how to make a cat ear beanie using your circular knitting machine. It'll look something like this. For this project, I'll be using my Addi 46 pin, but you could also use a 48 pin if that's what you have. So we'll start by casting on with our waste yarn. And if you have questions about any of the techniques that I covered that I don't go into great detail in this video, I do have a knitting machines playlist that has a lot of tips, tricks, technique to learn how to use your circular knitting machine. So we're going to cast on under the pin here with our waste yarn, and we're just going to go behind, in front, behind, in front, every pin all the way around, and we'll do about 5 rows. After you cast on with your waste yarn, now you're ready to add your working yarn. And then you're going to knit about 90 to 110 rows, whatever your personal preference is. I love a teeny weeny beanie. I wear them on a daily basis, and I typically go 90 to 100 rows for that perfect fit for me. So I'm going to go 100 rows for this project because that Caron Simply Soft yarn also has a lot of stretch to it. We just got to the end of our 100th row, and now we're going to cast off with waste yarn as well. But just make sure that you do leave a little bit of a tail. Typically what I do is I wrap around my machine a couple of times, and that gives me enough yarn to finish the project as I need to. With this one, I'm actually going to add 3 wraps around just to make sure that I have enough. And then we'll cast off with waste yarn. And for your cast off row, I absolutely recommend doing at least 5 rows. This end unravels very easily, so the more rows you have in your waste yarn, the less likely you are to have everything come unraveled. Now that your project is off of your machine, you're just going to give it a little bit of a tug here, just stretching out that yarn, and then you're going to fold it in half, leaving the right side facing out. So typically when you're making a beanie, you'll have this side as the bottom of your beanie. This side would be the top, and you would just pull the yarn and cinch both of the sides together. So you would just kind of create that drawstring, and that would give you a finish like this on your beanie. But we don't want this. We want to actually have that flat edge on the top. So we're going to do things just a little bit different. So first thing we need to do is line up our edges. So where our cast on and cast off yarn tails meet. And the reason we're doing that is to prevent any twisting in your hat. If you don't line those up, you're going to end up with kind of a wonky fit. So you definitely want to make sure that these are lined up. Now, once you've done that, the next step is going to be to pick up all of the live loops on both of the edges. And today, by special request, we're going to mix things up a little bit. And I'm actually going to finish the top of this project with my darning needle instead of using a crochet method. That way you can kind of see an alternate look with the difference between crochet and darning needle. Also, this is a very beginner-friendly way to finish the top of this if you're just getting started. So I do want to explain, first of all of these loops. The reason we used this waste yarn here is to make picking these loops up here a lot easier. You can see very clearly that this little yellow, right, this little yellow loop right here, this is part of your working yarn. This red is the waste yarn. So when you pick up the loops, you know exactly which ones you're going to go for. So we're going to start by picking up the first live loop on this side, picking up the live loop on that side, and then pull that really long yarn tail that we kept out at the end through both of those, just like that. Then we're going to go to the next one. Pick up that one, come back through, pick up that one. And we're literally just stitching those live loops together all the way around, and you'll tighten it as you go, just making sure not to miss any of those loops as you go around. So I'll continue picking up all those live loops all the way around, and then I'll meet you back here. Now that we've taken off the waste yarn, you'll see we still actually have an open tube, and we need to seal this tube up because this will be the top portion, and this is where we're going to be making the ears. Now you'll see, because we didn't do a crochet finish and we just used our yarn tail with a darning needle, so it's only the single strand of yarn tail that is going through all of those live loops holding it together. So if we were just to stitch this together at just underneath that single strand of yarn, this isn't going to hold together very well, and it's also not going to finish up very nicely. So we're going to actually stitch this together all the way across the top, and then we're going to go through and pick up our stitches. Again, I'm going to pick up a stitch that is below this single strand up here at the top, below these live loops here, and whatever method you want. For me, I'm just going to be weaving it through. So I'm just going to take my hook, using my finger, pushing it through both sides and just pulling it through. Again, this is not going to look pretty, but once we get to the other side, it'll be a lot cleaner. And then I'm just going back again. So I stitched one row this way, and now I'm stitching one row back. Now you'll see that this does not look very pretty, and that's okay because we're going to flip it inside out and we're going to put this on the inside so it will be hidden. So first thing we're going to do is take our little yarn tail that we used to stitch it all together, poke it through the corner and pull it to the inside. We're going to use it for the ears. Now that we've done that, let's turn her right side out. Now that we've attached the top portion, the next step is going to be to create the ears. Now you do want to map out where you want your ears to be because you're going to be stitching from end to end and then from end to end, and that's going to create those ears. You can also, depending on your personal preference, I've seen a few folks just do a couple of stitches right in the center of the ear on each side, and that seems to work for them. I prefer having full stitch all the way. My measurements that I use are going to be 3 inches down on the side and 2 inches across, and that will give us those adorable little ears just like this. But you can play with those measurements and see which works for you. So to make the ears, we are going to weave our yarn tail back into our work on the inside, trailing it down to our stitch marker. And then you don't want to pull it too hard because we still want to try to keep those corners intact. So now that we're down here, the next step is going to be to weave through both layers back and forth, all the way up to this stitch marker right here. And you do want to gather those stitches in small increments. If not, you're going to see yarn trail. In fact, I'll show you on the sample that I had before. So this one, I actually made the yarn trail visible, which you certainly can do. Again, it's really just a personal preference, but let's do a little bit smaller stitches on this one. So once you've stitched all the way across, and you can see this, I prefer this method, so you can't really see that yarn trail, which is really awesome. So now we're actually going to go back into the work and we're going to trail it again through this top portion, and we're going to come out at the next stitch marker. So to make the second ear, we're going to do the same process, just in reverse. So we're going to stitch from this stitch marker to this stitch marker, creating that diagonal line. And once you get down to that stitch marker, now we're actually going to go back to the inside of the work so that we can tie it off and hide it, and then no knots will be noticeable. And then just tie it off and then hide the yarn tail. So we'll tie it off with a double knot, and then we can actually hide the yarn tail in the ears. Since it's a double knit up here, you can actually just pop it through and then cut off the extra. Now sitting right here, it doesn't look like much, but let's see what it looks like on. And this is how easy it is to make a cat beanie with your circular knitting machine.